Lord Devereaux, did you order magazines again? I know you like the flavor, but you need to watch your diet.
Of course not. I'm still trying to voraciously consume the mountain of stories and poetry your fellow writers have so graciously created this month. It is a challenge I am more than happy to take on.
Okay, then who's at the door?
Greetings, friend. What are you doing? It's Blackheart.
I'm sorry, I must have misheard. Did someone say Blackheart? Finton! Oh, good, you're here. Yeah, Blackheart has somehow found us in the real world. What are we gonna do? Nope. I wish you all the best of luck, but I was never here. Finton, wait!
I'm sorry, who is Blackheart?
You know, the villain from the Order of the Pawn, created by C.J. Knight, aka Terrifying Tales. It was for one of Mina Howell's Divine photo prompts.
Oh, I didn't know any of that, but thank you for the helpful exposition.
What's going on? We don't like it when doors slam. Yeah, we have trauma associated with it.
Guys, I don't have time to unpack that right this second. There's someone at the door.
Just open it already. I can't have humans thinking I am rude to guests.
Sorry about that. I just had to get something out of the oven.
I see. Well, allow me to introduce myself. I am Calvian Grave, but you may call me... Wait a second! Is that Blackheart?
Oh, no.
It seems my reputation precedes me.
I'm your biggest fan! Arnold, he's the bad guy.
Evil is all a matter of perspective, my friend. He has a point, you know.
Don't encourage him, Lord Devereaux.
I have come seeking a man known across the realm as Terrifying Tales. I am told he is to be the guest on something called the Saved as Draft podcast.
You shut the door in his face again!
Guys, we can't stay here, okay? Let's get to my car, we can go to my house, and we'll record the podcast there.
Very well. But can we pick up some magazines on the way? I'm feeling peckish.
Alright, we'll see.
Oh, that always means no.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 40 of the Saved as Draft podcast. 40 episodes. Can you believe it? It's crazy to think. This started back in January, and 40 episodes later, here we are. Yeah, honestly, it feels like that was a lifetime ago. I'm going to go off script here for a minute, because this week has honestly felt like a lifetime for me. Without going into a ton of detail that would not serve anyone, I've been in a legal battle for pretty much a year now, and it's gone back and forth. At one point, I was, given a verdict in my side, and then there was an appeal, and the appeal has now turned it back on me. Like I said, I'm not going to go into all the details. Long story short, it's resulted in me getting hit with a financial burden that I had no way of paying back then, and I don't have any way of paying it now. I'm exploring options. Something is going to have to be something where it's either a miracle or I just have to go deeper into debt, which really sucks because I had to go into debt a few years ago before all this started. And I'm not here to point fingers and say who's the bad guy. Obviously, I thought I was in the right, but everyone does in one of these things. And it was a civil case, so obviously it's, nobody committed any crimes, right? But yeah, I don't often go off script on the podcast here, but I just wanted to share that because it has resulted in me being a little less active. Obviously, I'm still doing the challenge. I'm still, reading people's work. I'm still working on the podcast here, of course, and none of that's going to change. I have in the past, especially when things got really hard for me a few years ago, stopped writing and stopped being creative. And back then, I wasn't really part of a community. And now I am. And I love all of you. And your support really does mean the world to me. If it wasn't for your support, honestly, this situation would probably drive me back into obscurity. I'd probably stop writing. I'd bury myself in anything that made me feel better. And that never leads anywhere good, So no, I'm not going to back off. I'm not going to stop writing. I'm not going to stop supporting this community. I'm not going to stop doing these things that I love with every fiber of my being. None of that's going to change. I'm just scared, if I'm being honest. I'm scared. It's a lot of money, and I don't know where it's coming from. But I always preach mindfulness, and I always say this too shall pass, and there's a part of me beneath all the anxiety that does know that this too shall pass. And in the meantime, your support means everything. I did open a Ko-Fi coffee. I've heard it pronounced both ways. I got my page set up. I posted the link earlier. If you could share that around, I would appreciate it. Yeah, if you're able to donate, thank you so much. Just in general, I'm going to keep that page up and running even past this financial scare that I'm in because, I'm looking to continue to grow this and I want to do more challenges and I want to support writers in other ways and I want to do some cool new stuff with my work as well. And so at a certain point, you kind of have to start monetizing to make those things a reality. But know this, what is free will always be free on my publication. So if you've been a fan of the series that I do, if you've been a fan of my work, if you've been a fan of the podcast here, all of those things will be free forever. I will not just randomly paywall stuff. I'm not doing that. That being said, I may come up with some new stuff, brand new things that are options for paid subscribers or for people who want to purchase them. And I feel like that's a fair approach, right? It's adding, not taking away. So anyway, all that being said, if you get a chance to check out the Ko-Fi coffee, I don't know what to call it still, I would appreciate it. And I just want to say again, thank you to all of you. I really appreciate you. And I apologize for this interruption to the introduction of our podcast episode this week, but I appreciate you listening as well. So from here on out, we'll be back on script. But thank you again for listening. All right, and with our 40th episode of the Save This Draft podcast, we have a packed agenda, as always. We'll start with a look at the top 5 cosmic horror stories from this week's first Indulgence challenge prompts, and then I'm going to walk through all the narrative feasts from the past week for that psychological horror prompt as well. After that, I'm sitting down with CJ Knight, aka Terrifying Tales, for a full interview. This up-and-coming horror author has really made a name for himself in the community. He's produced some amazing stories for my power-up prompts, and for the first Indulgence as well. Not only that, but CJ Knight is the creator of Blackheart, as we heard in the intro. Devine fans will recognize that name. Blackheart first appeared in a story that CJ wrote for one of Mina Howell's photo prompts that was also set in Devine. I was so excited about the character when I read his story that I asked him if I could use Blackheart in the series, and he said of course, which I really appreciated. So in any case, it's a really cool interview that I know everyone's going to love, so stay tuned for that later in the episode. Oh, and one more thing, I'm going to put a link in the show notes to a spreadsheet that has all of the prompts from the challenge thus far this month. I had a few people ask for an easy way to find them besides scrolling through the subscriber chat, so I shared this in the meantime while I hope to work on something more official down the road. And this would not be possible without the help of Leron Haywood, who is an author that has been doing some stories for the challenge and reached out to ask if they could help with everything I've got going on. I am very bad at asking for help. So I went ahead and said yes. I said, yes, please, I could use the help. I have been trying to run this challenge, solo the whole month, and while it's been going pretty well, I definitely could use some help. So anyway, Leron helped fill out that sheet with all the submission links so far, so you can check that out to see all the stories too, in addition to the prompts. And Leron's also helping me with a few other things behind the scenes, so please, if you haven't subscribed, do so as a thank you, because everything going on in my life, plus my business trip next week, it would be very hard to stay on top of the challenge with the things that have come up for me. And so with Leron's help, things are going to keep moving smoothly, and I cannot thank them enough. All right, and with all that, our housekeeping's out of the way. Next up, we'll dive into our top 5 stories from week 4 of the first Indulgence, right after a message from this week's sponsor. Today's episode of the Save This Draft podcast is sponsored by Tentacle Pete's Cosmic Hot Sauce.
Wait a moment, you want me to read this? But I don't use hot sauce on my stories.
Just go ahead, Lord Devereaux. He's going to be here any second. Come on, it'll be funny.
We have very different ideas of humor, but very well. Oh no! I have tasted every flavor possible over the centuries. Can someone save me from flavor fatigue?
Hey there, folks. I'm Tentacle Pete. Don't ask why they call me that. Instead, let me ask you this. Isn't it time you gave your taste buds a flavor that's out of this world? Introducing Tentacle Pete's Cosmic Hot Sauce, made with 100% sustainably sourced eldritch horrors.
How does one sustainably source something that cannot be killed?
Don't worry about it. Instead, try a few drops of this and discover flavors that will wrench open your consciousness and assault your senses with the forbidden truths of the cosmos.
Oh, well, I suppose a little couldn't hurt. Oh my! I can see beyond the thin veil of reality. The secrets of the universe are rushing over my palate. It's all too much.
Yes? What do you see?
I just remembered that I left the oven on. I should go fix that. It's pretty good hot sauce, to be fair. Tell Tentacled Pete he did good work.
Well, Tentacle Pete's me, but we should have had a human subject for this ad. In any case, you heard it here first. Shatter your mind and your taste buds in a single bite. Order yourself a bottle of Tentacle Pete's Cosmic Hot Sauce today. All right, and we're back. For week 4 of the challenge, we did Cosmic Horror, which is my personal favorite. I've tallied the scores, so let's see which stories made our leaderboard for week 4 of the first Indulgence challenge. In first place this week, with 47 points, is Reliquary of Malevolence by Connor Mancuso. This was for the first prompt of the week involving an artifact in a museum. What I loved about this piece was how you could tell Connor was comfortably in his cosmic horror wheelhouse. It's a lot of C's. This first place piece feels like a classic H.P. Lovecraft story, though, in all the best ways. And once again, Connor's style of epic poetry provides the perfect vessel with which to fill his signature word choice and pitch-perfect pacing. A lot of P's, too. Every line is carefully crafted to guide the eye and enrapture the mind. We get all the greatest hits of cosmic horror here as well. The way it escalates to the point where it surpasses human comprehension is beautifully done. The scope of the thread as well balloons to cosmic heights. It's fantastic cosmic horror and well deserving of the first place slot. Here's an excerpt that I enjoyed. Then something whispered. Not a word, a sound. Like 1,000 throats exhaling all at once. It came from somewhere between the walls. A breath so vast it pressed the air against his chest. Who's there? The words came out trembling. A pitiful human noise against the magnitude of vice pressing down on him. The whisper answered, though not in sound, but in thought. A concept, raw and invasive. A presence, too large to fit inside his skull.
Where is the seal?
Lord Devereux, what'd you think of this one?
Cosmic horror is my comfort food. Flavors that remind me of home. And Connor's work does indeed feel like going home. It incorporates authentic flavors of dread, of the unknown, of the unfathomable. A story that is simultaneously fresh and nostalgic.
Good stuff. In second place, with 40 points, it's The Watcher in the Glass by Bent But True. This is another story from the first of the cosmic horror prompts this week about the museum, and the missing artifact here Bent But True offers is called the Mirror of Thammuz, which is described as he who envies the living. According to the story, the artifact is less of a prison and more of an aperture, which I really liked. It is believed that God within could only look upon our world through gifted reflections, which is really fantastic lore. As the story goes on, you may see where it's heading, but you'll be powerless to stop it, which creates that perfect sense of dread and lends to the cosmic horror on display. It ends on a final note that had me kind of staring off into space for a few minutes. Here's an excerpt I enjoyed. On the inside of the lid, faint trails, 5 at a time, as if fingers dragged through fog. They arc downward like someone tried to climb out. The camera's red eye stares. On the desk feed, a man touches the glass. Here, the case answers with a low wail note from its seals. I speak because silence feels like consent. What is this? The reflection smiles on delay. When it opens its mouth, the words arrive in my ear before the lips move. They come through the radio, the vents, the bones. My voice.
Window,
it says.
Not cage.
The black thins like oil on a skillet. For a second, I see through. Not bricks or seals, but a coastline that never ends. Pillars like teeth. A sky that is a lid. A face beyond it. Scaled not to me, but to continents. It is not angry. It is not kind. It has noticed me. Whew! Beautiful and chilling work from Bent But True as always. Lord Devereux, what'd you think?
Bent But True combines artistic prose with the tenets of the cosmic divine in this delicious offering. The flavor of the artifact and its true nature intrigues the palate, while the ending leaves a beautiful aftertaste that welcomingly lingers long after the story is complete.
Good stuff. In third place, with 33 points, it's Too Far Gone by Mina Howell. This cosmic horror poem was for day 21 of the challenge, in which I asked for a story about a journalist going undercover in a cult. Mina's piece here zooms in on a singular moment that is incredibly important to any cosmic horror story. It's the moment when hope evaporates and only despair remains. The moment when the character's mind shatters like glass. That's where Mina focused her efforts here, and the concentrated nature of poetry itself adds to this. Mina's intentional, eloquent, and focused poetry style drives home the cosmic horror themes all the way to its chilling conclusion. Here's an excerpt I enjoyed. In that moment, the air stood still. He peeled back his skin, began eating his fill. Higher and higher, his form began to rise. My blood ran cold. I couldn't stifle my cries. What once was a man, unremarkable and soft, now an unfathomable beast. At my fear he scoffed. Amazing. Lord Devereaux, your thoughts on this one?
Mina's cosmic horror poetry offers a delicious combination of concentrated themes and captivating structure that explodes with flavor each time a stanza is completed. It is, as humans say, the gift that keeps on giving.
I love that. In fourth place, with 29 points, it's Fragment of the Divine by Mary Ellen Brady. With this story, Mary Ellen also brought forth her take on the first prompt of the week. In this one, she plays with non-Euclidean space, as the museum itself begins to shift around our protagonist in impossible ways. The way this escalates is incredible, and Mary Ellen's imagery once again takes the mind on a terrifying journey through mere words. It's something you really need to experience to properly understand it, but let me see if I can show you what I mean with this excerpt. My bones ached. Not pain, more like memory. My skeleton remembered being configured differently. My spine recalled when it had more vertebrae. It spiraled instead of stacked. My skull was too small, too limited. 3 dimensions didn't fit. I stumbled, caught myself against a display case. My reflection in the glass looked back, but it was smiling. I wasn't. My reflection's eyes were darker, pupils dilated wide, as if to drink in more light than existed in this narrow band of human reality.
You've stood vigil over my dream for so long,
that voice whispered through the static, through the walls, through the space between my thoughts.
Did you think it was coincidence? Did you think they hired you by chance?
No, this was insane. I'd applied online. Been interviewed by the head of security, Marquez. Filled out paperwork in HR. This was just a job. I couldn't remember Marquez's face now, or the HR representative's name. Couldn't remember the interview questions or what I'd said. The memories were there, but they had the flat, unconvincing quality of a dream half remembered. Stage dressing. Set pieces in a play I'd been performing without realizing I was an actor. The museum was always odd. I'd told myself it was atmosphere, old building, ancient artifacts, the weight of all this history. The architecture didn't quite follow physical laws. Rooms were too large for the building's exterior, hallways that connected spaces that shouldn't touch, the way I sometimes climbed stairs to reach the ground floor or descended to reach the 3rd story. The building wasn't a museum that contained artifacts. The building was the artifact. Amazing. And I had to grab an extended excerpt so you could see how it flows into that last part there with the museum itself. Really incredible work. I love this so much. Lord Devereaux, what'd you think?
I often find the limits of 3 dimensions to be suffocating. I love it when a story allows me to stretch my mind and body into realms and concepts beyond the one I currently inhabit. Mary Ellen has once more taken me on a journey that captivates all of my senses, taste included.
And in 5th place, with 27 points, it's Tear in the Eye by Jennifer Jorgensen. One thing I love about Jennifer's work is that it always puts a unique spin on whatever genre or premise that it's using. You'll never encounter the same idea twice in her stories, and it's honestly really impressive. So, with this one, we get a secret romance between the scientist in the story and a mystery surrounding the interdimensional rift, since this story was for day 22's prompt about that existing beneath Antarctica. It all centers around something called the tear, which is described as smears of color across midnight ink. I love that image. Where the story really kicks into high gear is how Jennifer alludes to these colors from the tear making their way into the eyes of observers. It's like an infection, and it starts spreading very quickly. Jennifer does this amazing job of instilling dread as well, because the people who are infected can spread it just by looking into the eyes of others. And once you're infected, it's almost like you're at peace. That part is really haunting. It makes the infection seem almost enticing. Here's an excerpt I enjoyed. For a long moment, he didn't answer, still shining the light into her pupils and staring, mouth hanging open in shock. Finally, he whispered, I don't know, but it's beautiful. Ellis blinked. Kenji had never flirted with her, and she wasn't sure he was doing it now. My eyes are beautiful? She asked carefully. Your pupils. It's like there are little swirls of color in them, he answered dreamily, a faint smile appearing as he gazed dumbstruck into her eyes. The tear, she thought. It's in my eyes. She knew she needed Kenji's help, but he seemed lost to the fascination of the swirling blackness. She shoved him with all her strength, knocking him, stumbling back until he fell on his ass, blinking as though just coming awake. What? He asked, confused. You said my pupils are swirling, Kenji, she answers as she dropped to the floor to help him up. Don't look in my eyes. You got distracted when you did. When he looked toward her eyes, she closed them to protect him. I don't know what's happening, but I think something's wrong with me. I'm infected or something. From the tear. The frown was back on his gaunt face. It was strange. Your pupils, they were alive. Moving. I've never seen anything like it. I have, came her worried answer. It's how the tear looks. Like colored after images of bright lights and blackness. He was nodding. That's it, exactly. And it's in your eyes? Amazing. I love the way that Jennifer took the prompt and ran with it until she reached this beautiful sort of cosmic horror that to me was equal parts intriguing, beautiful, and terrifying. Lord Devereaux, what did you think?
Sometimes the greatest fear of all is missing out. In this story, Jennifer creates a fate that seems almost welcoming. It's not a violent takeover, nor is it a painful replacement of oneself. Instead, it's a soft, smiling, slow sort of becoming. Beautiful, as you said, and deeply haunting as well. A wonderful combination of flavor.
I gotta say, Lord Devereaux and I are loving the cosmic horror this week, everyone. Seriously, these stories are taking the genre in bold new directions, and I love to see it, so thank you to everyone in the top 5 and everyone submitting this week. You are doing incredible work. Next up, we'll take a look at our narrative feasts from this week, right after another short message. The war to end all wars brought humanity to the edge of extinction. Years on, defying the odds, Eden remained. A paradise within the wasteland. It was a peaceful life for those in Eden. Then, the wolves appeared. Dana Sterling was only a young girl when they first appeared. Now, at 19, Dana is a member of the Reavers, one of many charged with fighting to keep the last of humanity alive against the growing number of savage beasts. But things are changing. Dana sees it. The appearance of alpha wolves threatens the last stand of humanity. The alpha wolves have gained control over the others. No longer are the wolves savage and disorganized. Now they fight with a frightening level of intelligence and cold calculation. As the war rages on, Dana discovers that not everyone she knows is who they appear to be, and wolves aren't the only monsters in Eden. Eden, War of the Wolf, Book 1 by C.J. Knight, aka Terrifying Tales, is available now on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited. Get your copy at the link in the show notes. Alright, and we're back. For Narrative Feast number 3, I asked you to write your ideal psychological horror story. Your 3 questions to address were, can we trust the narrator? Can the threat in the story be explained by science? And what is the deeper truth your character is hiding or running from? Let's see what everyone came up with for this week. First up, I need to share a story from last week's feast that slipped through the cracks. Lord Devereaux was very displeased with me, so I do apologize for the oversight. So, to start us off this week, let's talk about a Narrative Feast story from number 2 entitled What Remains of the Knowing by Sylvienne Ethara. This one was excellent. It uses a journal entry structure to tell us the story of a team investigating an artifact that is emanating a sound with horrific effects for anyone who hears it. It's called the Proto-Hymn, and as the stories go on, we learn about where it came from, what it wants, and what it means for the wider world. There's a lot of amazing lines in this piece across the journal entries, but my favorite reads that the melody isn't evil, it's honest. That's why it breaks you. Incredible. And with this story, I'm immediately a fan of this author's work. And you will be too. Check it out at the top of the Narrative Feast section in the show notes, and apologies to Sylvienne for missing this one last week. I'm really glad you helped me find it because I loved it. Lord Devereux, what'd you think of this one?
This feast was well worth the wait. I could taste the fear that permeated each journal entry as the song of the proto-hymn found its way deep into the recesses of the characters' minds. A devilishly delicious horror story.
Excellent. Amazing. A great one from Narrative Feast number 2. All right. And our first story for Narrative Feast number 3 is The Chronometer of Doubt by Rebecca Watson. This was a phenomenal story to start off this week's psychological horror feast. It opens with a strange, almost surreal scene, and several important details hit you right away. It immediately builds intrigue and mystery, but as the story goes on, the real hook is how it will have you constantly guessing what is actually real. You'll be constantly second-guessing what the narrator is telling you as well, and trying to figure out what's actually happening. There's also this through line in the narrative about a car accident that serves as the backbone of the story's primary mystery. The way Rebecca plays this out amidst the strange setting our protagonists find themselves in really keeps the psychological horror front and center all the way through to this story's bone-chilling conclusion. Great work to start us off this week. Lord Devereux, what'd you think?
I love stories that keep the palate guessing. There are hints of flavor throughout this piece that tease and entice, ultimately leading to a satisfying and delicious conclusion.
Second this week is Crescent Convergence by Mary Ellen Brady. Once again, Mary Ellen channels Crichton, but this time she adds in some truly terrifying Lovecraftian horror to our psychological horror prompt. If you enjoyed one of her prior stories for the challenge entitled The Return, you're going to love this one. It once again blends together scientific and medical concepts seamlessly into a new kind of discovery that rewrites millions of years of history. What begins as an exciting discovery soon spirals into a psychological roller coaster, as it's clear there's far more going on than meets the eye. The way Mary Ellen plants doubt into the minds of the characters here is just masterful. Love this story. Lord Devereux, what did you think?
Mary Ellen once more blurs the line between fiction and reality, speaking with the certainty of a learned scholar and weaving a tale that feels as if it could be real. The stakes just keep rising until the ending, which leaves you with the bitter taste of despair, lingering on the palate just long enough to instill dread.
Third this week is The Fire Tunnel by Bent But True. And with this piece, we dive into a world where the psychological horror is disguised as faith and belief. It tells the story of a character who from a very young age is surrounded by worshippers, including her father, who pressure her to follow their ways and in their footsteps. The psychological horror here is brilliant because the story is positioned in such a way that you wonder nearly the entire time if anything happening is real or if it's all a result of blind faith. It captures the relentless fervor of religious zeal extremely well. As someone who grew up Catholic myself, but no longer practices any religion, this was an excellent example of what happens when people believe without question. The haunting atmosphere here that the author is known for also comes through beautifully. Lord Devereux, what'd you think?
The flavor of faith is one that begins sweet but turns sour if left on the palate for too long. Bent But True once more wields a steady hand with this story, bringing forth the dangers of blind faith, but never lingering on the topic for too long. The flavors, as a result, remain intact.
Next we have Withdrawal by Jennifer Jorgensen. And this is a companion piece to Jennifer's other story for the challenge called Best High Ever, so make sure you check out that one as well. But let's dive in. This story is about a drug that you administer through eye drops, and that's the crux of the narrative here, but the deeper story is about a character trying to impress the guy she has a crush on. Things go poorly after her crush ends up accidentally taking way too much of the drug, and as you can imagine, things quickly devolve into panicked horror from there. The imagery is shocking, the narration sharp, and the ending left me wide-eyed and desperate for more. I love this world that Jennifer's created with these stories. The drug itself, actually, reminds me of something that I have in my cosmic horror novel that I've been working on for more years than I'd like to admit. The only real similarity is that mine is also administered with an eyedropper, but beyond that, I gotta say what Jennifer did in this story with her drug that's fictional is way cooler. I mean, check out the link at the show notes and you'll want to read that companion piece as well because this world is incredible. Lord Devereux, what'd you think?
Jennifer's horror always brings with it unexpected but welcome flavors that surprise the palate with experiences unlike anything else. Her use of a strange substance in this story, fueled by the sweetness of emotion, resulted in a perfectly balanced narrative feast.
And next up this week is Zombieism or Hypothermia by Leron Haywood. Leron once again delivers this with a wildly unique premise that combines my prompt with a prompt from dailyprompt.com. It's a winning combo, because here we get someone who is convinced they are dead but is still very much aware. The confusion and uncertainty really lends itself to that psychological horror for this week's prompt, and you're constantly oscillating between the two options presented in the title. By the end, you won't have a complete answer, but you will have a better idea of what is most likely going on. It's one of those stories that leaves things open-ended, and it's all the better for it. A really fun read. Lord Devereux, what'd you think here?
Leron's feasts always offer a strong initial flavor of intrigue, which then dovetails into further mystery before finally leaving the palate with a curious aftertaste. It's an experience that captivates the mind and palate equally.
Up next is I Need My Husband by Terrifying Tales, aka CJ Knight, aka the guest on this week's episode. This story, however, is no laughing matter. It's a deeply emotional tale about the subjective nature of reality when trauma shatters our psyche. It starts out normal enough, setting up some great characters and a truly genuine and loving family, but the horror starts to emerge soon after. It's little things like the child's drawings or the things he says, but it escalates until the truth is staring you directly in the face. And what a truth it is. I was incredibly impressed with CJ's work on this piece. It shows a wide range of emotion and narrative depth, while also coming out of left field with a phenomenal series of twists in that final act. Lord Devereux, what did you think?
Terrifying Tales indeed manages to terrify the mind as well with this exquisite narrative feast. The layers of intrigue and mystery combine with genuine emotion, blending together into a tale that will leave your heart and your mind shattered upon the floor.
And next up for this narrative feast week is The Mothman's Really Real by Richard Pack. This is a poem from one of my favorite world builders, and it does an amazing job of layering in psychological horror by making us doubt the sanity of the narrator. It also brings a fresh new perspective on the Mothman cryptid, painting it as a creature that flocks to souls that are struggling with loneliness, fear, or depression. I have to also commend the ending, which breaks the fourth wall in a way that actually made me shout out loud as I was reading. And in fact, I shouted so loud I woke up both my dogs, who started running around my office like, what's going on? What's happening? It's been a while since a story made me react like that. Lord Devereux, what'd you think?
Richard's poetry offers a taste of his signature world-building, while also lavishing the palate with rich voice and tone that immerses one into the piece. It's no wonder the ending caught you off guard. That's what happens when a poem truly captivates the reader.
Well said. Next we have The Seamstress by Brenda, A Voice That Wonders. This is one of Brenda's best. It's a wildly unique premise about a seamstress who can glimpse events and emotions by touching the clothing and fabric that she's working with. It's like the pieces themselves have absorbed things that their owners have experienced while wearing them. It's a really cool concept, and it's used to chilling effect, as Brenda weaves in and out of these visions. See what I did there? It's a story that builds strong characters, an intriguing mystery, and a captivating tale that you'll wish didn't have to end so soon. Lord Devereux, what'd you think of this one?
Much like the seamstress in the story, Brenda has crafted a tale that blends together multiple threads of tapestries of flavors. A sprinkle of intrigue, a dash of the macabre, 2 spoonfuls of horror, and all of it shaken, not stirred. A delectable story.
And next we have Haunting by Artemis. This is a beautiful and surreal psychological horror done in a style that only Artemis can do. It's a story that anchors itself within a car in a forest, but it will often drift to other settings, memories, and mysteries. The themes of the forest and its denizens also bleed through into every aspect of the story, whether it's roots or branches creeping into her dreams, or a particularly haunting image near the end involving antlers stitched onto a human skull. The story keeps your head spinning as the line between reality, dreams, and memory blurs. It's a psychological thrill ride with hints of folk horror and a strong theme that ties it all together. Excellent work from Artemis, as always, and there's a certain magic to their writing style that never ceases to amaze me. Lord Devereux, what'd you think?
Artemis has brought forth a feast that is simultaneously delicious and a true work of art for the eyes to behold. The imagery transcends the page, and the foundation of the forest and the car gives us solid ground, however briefly, before the story whisks us away to sights and sensations that captivate the palate.
And last this week is It Crawled Beneath by Verdant Butterfly. What I loved about this psychological horror is how it's something we've all encountered before, but it's done here in a chilling and actually very fun way. The concept is simple. A spider has crawled into your bed, and you spot it just as it slinks beneath the sheets. Your paranoia kicks in. You start to wonder if that tickle on your leg is the spider, and things just spiral downward from there. In this piece, Verdant Butterfly captures the concept perfectly, and her iconic poetry style keeps things fun and light while highlighting the way that our mind begins racing in times like these. It's that perfect balance of panic and playfulness. I loved it. Lord Devereux, what'd you think?
Our resident butterfly captures the chaos of a single moment in this wonderfully composed narrative feast. The way the poem highlights the primal fear of an unseen insect is both charming and profoundly relatable. To humans, I mean, I'm not scared of spiders. Of course not. Why would I be?
Okay. Next, we've got The Voice Between Mirrors by Connor Mancuso. So this is a really unique story from Connor that starts out simply enough, but quickly dives into some fourth wall breaking storytelling that you know I'm a fan of. At a certain point, the story begins addressing the reader directly. It's really creepy, and it's not used as a gimmick either. A good portion of the story actually expands on this concept, pulling you deeper and deeper into its world. I loved it. Lord Devereux, what'd you think?
Connor has managed to surprise me, which is quite difficult to do. By directly addressing the reader, I experienced a flavor similar to surprise, but to an extent that I've not tasted in some time. It is a tale that will remain with me. Quite impressive.
Next up is The Shriving of Dave Norwood by Wendy Cockcroft. Wendy also shared some context for the story, explaining that shriving is the act of hearing confession. Dave's deeper truth in this story is that he's a hypocrite, and he would rather prefer that the law did not apply to him. So yes, the story is set in a world where people can be infected, but it seems like they can also be rehabilitated, at which point they are known as restored. It's a really cool concept. And in this story, we find out that the punishment for harboring an infected is death. This is important because our protagonist, Dave, has been harboring his infected wife, and the truth gets out shortly into our story here. What follows is an extremely tense trial. The dialogue is sharp and the atmosphere thick as things play out. I was on the edge of my seat all the way to the end. It has amazing writing and world building from Wendy this week. Lord Devereux, what'd you think?
Wendy's narrative feast provides a vast array of tension and fear, flavors I will always welcome upon the palate. The dialogue offers concentrated bites of emotion as well, creating an atmosphere that lingers like a delicious aftertaste.
And our final narrative feast this week is All Over, Again, by Jonathan Hogue. This is a really unique premise and a great psychological horror story as well to finish us off. The concept is a woman who has experienced intense deja vu her entire life. When she gets older, it gets worse as well. She's experiencing time differently than everyone else. She goes to see a doctor and gets recommended for a study. Answers begin revealing themselves, but this story will take you down a fascinating rabbit hole of twists and turns before it's through. I love the complexity and the unique premise here. What did you think, Lord Devereux?
Indeed, Jonathan has provided quite the combination of flavors in this piece. A dash of intrigue, a serving of mystery, some temporal plot points for texture, and finally, a rush of revelations to carry the palate through to the end. A fantastic story, filled with rich flavor.
Amazing work once again on the Narrative Feast this week. And as a reminder, I will be out of town next week, so any stories submitted for Narrative Feast 4 will be featured the following week on November 7th's episode of the podcast. So if you don't hear about it next week, that's why. I'm going to have to record Halloween's episode a bit early before I have to catch a flight. So just remember, any Narrative Feasts submitted after this week's episode for Narrative Feast 4 will be featured on November 7th's podcast. Apologies for the delay. Okay, and next up is our interview with CJ Knight, right after a quick mindful moment. Hey there, this is Chill Bradley, here for this week's mindful moment. I want to read you a note from Substack earlier this week. It says, "A small reminder, you're not behind. You're just becoming. Not slower than you should be, just deeper than most people ever go. The world pretends to reward speed, but meaning asks for patience. Let yourself take time to heal, to build, to make something real. You're not lost. You're growing roots. notes to myself and others. And that's a beautiful note from Substack earlier this week from fellow writer Luna Ashley Kolsu. She's been featured on the show before numerous times for her stories in the past. And here, Luna reminds us that we're all on our own timelines. It's okay to sit still and breathe. Because just like Luna said, that's how you grow roots. Thanks for listening. Back to the show. All right, and we're back. This week, my guest is a horror author who also narrates his work on YouTube. He's made quite the splash on Substack in recent months as well, including several power-up prompt stories and a few for the first Indulgence, including one that we heard about during the Narrative Feasts. He's had quite the journey thus far, and he's had plenty of exciting things in the pipeline as well. So without further delay, let's get into this week's interview. All right, everybody, and this week I'm really excited to welcome to the Saved as Draft podcast a writer of original horror stories that stay with you long after you finish reading. Please welcome to the show, CJ Knight, aka Terrifying Tales. Thanks for being here.
No, thanks for having me, Bradley.
So let's start off by having you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your creative journey thus far.
Yeah, okay. So I'm trying to make writing. Obviously, the dream is to make writing a career. Obviously, I'm not trying to get rich, but if I could turn it into a way to earn a living, that'd be the ultimate dream. But I suppose I grew up watching horror and reading horror. It's been a passion of mine my entire life. You know, my parents had a substantial VHS collection when I was little, and they kind of got sick of me sneaking their horror movies to watch, and ended up just letting me watch them and watching them with me. So I grew up on a lot of the 80s classics, a lot of the big staple franchises, and that sort of graduated into being an avid reader of things like Goosebumps by R.L. Stine. And then I suppose honestly honed my craft through my career. I joined the police when I was 20, and sort of worked my way up to detective by the age of 26, and sort of stayed there till I was 37. And then obviously did a lot of paperwork involved and dealing with a lot of horrible things. I suppose it was almost like a career in true horror writing. And then now I sort of use that as inspiration and have turned to the fictional world.
That's really interesting. I had no idea that you had that kind of experience, but I can imagine how that would sort of like, having lived some of it, it would kind of work as inspiration for your writing. When you were a detective and you had to kind of fill out reports and stuff like that, would you say that was also kind of practice at sort of like, framing how an event kind of played out or kind of putting the pieces together? Did that sort of inform your kind of narrative style eventually?
It did. It was sort of something that I wasn't fantastic at to begin with, but I've experience, taking statements off people and asking, what their version was. It sort of morphed into capturing how they felt when something terrible happened, and learning to put emotion into it as well, to sort of be their advocate. I found that it sort of, there's a tendency with that sort of work to be robotic and sort of just, a black and white, this is what happened. I just found it better served people to include, paint a picture, I guess, as opposed to just, it taught me to show, not tell, I guess.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. That is so fascinating. Also, on the subject of when you were kind of talking about the VHS horror movies back in the day, what were some of like kind of the ones that you initially saw that really kind of made you into a horror fan?
So the earliest memory I have is sneaking out of bed when I was about 5 years old and crawling under the dining table without mum and dad knowing, and seeing the original Child's Play.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah, terrified of my Cabbage Patch doll that mum had for me because she was convinced I was going to be a girl before I was born.
Oh man, yeah, I can imagine after seeing Child's Play, I'd be terrified of any and all dolls.
Yep.
That's fantastic. So, what what kind of made you take that leap? I mean, I guess it was kind of your experience, as you said. Like, when did you first start kind of writing stories? Was it, after the period of your life when you were a detective and you kind of, built that skill, or were you writing horror stories before that?
Uh, yeah, no, it was definitely after.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it was. I guess it kind of. I developed the bug without knowing it, if that makes sense, because I was doing it every day.
Mm,
That was the biggest hole I had when I left, is that I was no longer writing anything. So I just tried one day and then
interesting.
haven't stopped.
That's amazing. I have never heard that quite, a story quite like that, but it makes total sense. It's just fascinating just kind of to hear about that trajectory there. So that kind of brings us to my next question, which is, what brought you to Substack and how long approximately have you been here?
Yeah, so in the scheme of things, not very long. I think I
Hmm.
joined in June this year, and it was something I'd never actually heard of Substack before June this year, strangely enough. And
Mm,
it was actually from a friend who knew about Substack and knew I was into writing and doing the YouTube channel thing, and said, "Well, you should be on there as well." And I thought, "Oh well, I'll have a look." Trusted them and had a look, and I thought, "Yeah, I agree. I probably should try this."
right. Okay. So you mentioned your YouTube channel, which I wanted to talk about, and I think now's a good a time as any. So is your YouTube channel kind of where you first started publishing your writing then?
Definitely. It was just, yeah, it was something I thought, you know what, I'll just give this a go. I'd never recorded, dealt with audio and editing and all of that sort of thing before, and just sort of fumbled my way through it and taught myself. And yeah, just put them on there. And to be honest, I think I've only put one on there this month. It's sort of, I've sort of triaged it down to second behind Substack. Um,
Right.
but yeah, no, so it's just the same. Yeah, YouTube channel is just Terrifying Tales, which is kind of why I chose that name for Substack as well, to kind of link it all together.
That makes sense. Yeah, from a branding standpoint, that makes total sense. Do you have any plans in the future to move some of that audio over to Substack and kind of embed that in your stories there, or are you trying to kind of keep it separate?
I probably will, to be honest. It's something that until I heard some of your stories, I didn't know you could do that on Substack.
Right.
um, but yeah, I honestly, I'm going to have to teach myself how to do that. I'm hoping it's sort of similar, and then I should be able to do it.
Yeah, one thing I'll say, and this is for the benefit of anybody listening to the episode too, is that the way that I have my podcast set up, for example, is I do the audio on Substack first and foremost, but I have it kind of linked up in the settings where it also posts the audio on YouTube for me, and it's all just kind of automated. So there might be a way to do that. In fact, there should be a way to do that with any future audio. So, for example, if you post it on Substack, you should be able to hook it up where it can kind of upload to your YouTube for you as well, just to make things easier.
Okay, that's good to know, actually.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, I was checking out your YouTube channel the other day because I saw mention of it in your bio and I was like, oh, that's really interesting, and so that's really cool that you're doing some narration and stuff. I always love to see that. So going on to my next question here, how would you kind of classify your own style of horror? Like, what are some of the horror kind of themes that you focus on in your work?
Yeah, okay. So I guess it's kind of eclectic. I guess with all of us, uh, our influences are we sort of we learn them from what we like, and we take the parts of what we like and then shape them to be our own. But obviously, early on, as I said before, I was an avid collector of R.L. Stein's Goosebumps books,
Mm,
and I kind of I guess the part that I always try and remember from him, and I'll still even pull one out and read one today,
hmm.
um, is his page turning ability. He sort of taught me not all subgenres of horror, but with horror, it's general practice to keep it moving, not to
Hmm.
get bogged down. Stephen King, love Stephen King, especially his ability to describe the world.
Hmm.
Uh, his way of putting you in the geography of where the story is set is something that I try and keep in mind. And then I suppose there's even some non horror. aspects that I try and include, or I've sort of shaped into my own writing.
Mm-hmm.
George Martin's Song of Ice and Fire series, I've particularly fond of it, and in particular his ability to show versus tell a fight scene. Like if anyone ever asks me, it tends to be a common question of some sort of fight or scuffle. How do you show it versus tell it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that he's a master of that. I have even one particular example is in A Feast for Crows with Euron Greyjoy. There's a
Mm-hmm.
particular battle on a boat with him that I will read. I will just read that part of the book every now and then.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. Those are some great sources of inspiration. I would agree with all of them as well. I mean, I've always been a fan of definitely Stephen King, and I love hearing Goosebumps because I grew up reading Goosebumps books, man.
Yeah.
Every time I can get my hands on one.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Did you ever read the Goosebumps books that were kind of like choose your own adventures? Those were my favorite.
I did. And I still to this day remember that the first one, it was called like the Carnival of Horrors or the Carnival of Terror. I've
Yeah,
got it here somewhere on the bookshelf still.
that's
But I
amazing.
remember that there's only one good ending. And
Right.
I remember reading it in frustration for hours trying to find that one good ending.
That's fantastic. I was exactly the same way. I would get so frustrated when I kept hitting dead ends. Um, have you ever thought about, writing a story like that? I mean, I myself have experimented with the format a few times, but knowing what I've read of your work, I feel like it'd be super interesting if you ever wanted to kind of explore like a branching narrative like that. I'm curious if you ever thought about it.
Uh, Honestly, I haven't. It's an interesting concept, actually. Yeah, I haven't actually ever considered it before. But now that you mention it, it would be, I like to try and tackle new things.
Yeah. Especially if you're doing like narration, like on YouTube and Substack and stuff, you can kind of narrate different paths, and there's ways to do it. And if you're ever curious, I can share some tips based on my experience because I've done I think like 4 or 5 branching narrative stories on Substack, and it's mostly just kind of manual, sort of, making sure it's organized and kind of telling the reader where they should scroll to. There's ways to like link up, different kind of navigation links, but it doesn't
Yeah,
always work across platforms. So, in any case, I think you would do well at it. That's why I wanted to ask.
yeah.
Okay, cool. So, when it comes to inspiration, where do you typically go to kind of get inspired for new work? It sounds like it's probably movies, which I would agree with. But is there anything else that's like kind of like your go-to sort of like activity or hobby to kind of get inspired?
Yeah. So, yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. I do. I have favorite horror movies that I've watched multiple times, and I'll rewatch those to remind myself of what the classic tropes are, and then try and consider ways to subvert expectation as well. Um, but yeah, I still read as often as possible. Pretty much, I'll give anything a go. I obviously horror is my favorite, but at the moment, I'm halfway through a novel by Joe Nesbo. The Harry, I think it's pronounced Hule, if you're Norwegian series. I think they made one film about that series, The Snowman, but that's more of a detective novel. But yeah, I just read as often as possible as well, and try and read new things. I guess that's where I was going with Joe Nesbo, because I like to see what other writers are doing, and you can learn. Even a book you don't enjoy, you can learn from, because you
Hmm.
can learn what you don't like and what you don't want to do. But yeah, you can obviously, every writer's different, and you can see different things that work well for you, and yeah, obviously you can learn things that you don't want to use as well.
Right. I think that's a really good point, actually. Yeah, there's definitely value in, like you said, branching out, reading different things, but also even if you're not necessarily, if it's not the best story you've ever read, I think you brought up a really good point about pulling, things from that are kind of okay. Well, this is something I don't like, or this is something that I know that I won't do in my stories. I like that a lot. It's really good advice.
Yeah,
Um, so you mentioned recently when I was talking to you that you had a story accepted into the Dread Literary Review magazine, which is awesome. Congratulations.
yeah, thank
Um,
you. I'm pretty
which
excited
story
about
is
that.
that? Can you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, so it's the issue comes out, I think, on the 23rd of October. So I
Okay.
think, yeah, actually, yeah, we might need an edit there because this is coming out Friday.
No, it's all good.
Yeah, so the story is called The Frozen Peas, and the issue is for mundane horror.
Hmm.
Um, it's definitely a genre or a subgenre of horror I've never tackled,
Hmm.
and to be honest, had to look into it a little bit and find that pretty much Shirley Jackson's work was my only previous experience with reading any of it. So I reread her short story, The Lottery, and tried to remember as much as I could about The Haunting of Hill House.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I came up with the idea for The Frozen Peas, which is essentially just a story about a woman who goes to the supermarket to do her shopping and grabs frozen peas from the frozen food aisle. And at the checkout, they won't let her purchase them. They tell her they're not for her. And the story sort of goes from there.
Interesting. Okay, that's a really interesting premise. I like that. All right. Well, yeah. If the issue is out as of this episode's release, I will make sure to put the link in the show notes to that latest issue of the Dread Literary Review. That's fantastic. Is that the first time one of your stories has been accepted into a literary magazine?
Yes, yep. For a literary magazine, yes. I've had a couple of short stories accepted into compilation issues for books before, but yeah, first time for a magazine.
That's fantastic. I love it. So, something else I wanted to ask you about too is anybody who's following along with my ongoing First Indulgence writing challenge. As of week three's recap that I posted, you were number 10 on the leaderboard, which is fantastic. I was really happy to see your name on there.
Yeah, I was happy too, and slightly not frustrated with the position, but I have been frustrated over October because it coincides with school holidays here in Australia. So I've had
Ah.
periods of time where I've just had to watch the prompts and know I'm not going to have an opportunity to write that day. Uh, so yeah, I've had a little bit of frustration in terms of wanting to write more without being able to.
Right, I totally understand that. Yeah, I didn't even think about how it would coincide with other parts of the world there. But yeah, I could see how that would make it difficult to have a lot of writing
Yeah.
time. Well, you've done I don't know off the top of my head how many, but you've done a few submissions for the challenge. The one that comes to mind off the top of my head, I think it was from last week. It was well, I want to say the title was Frying Bacon, is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was a really good one. But I'm curious, like out of all the stories you've kind of done for the challenge, which one is sort of your favorite? Or which one's been doing the best for you as far as engagement?
Engagement, I couldn't be 100% sure of, but I think my favorite was probably for the day two prompt, all the
Okay.
way back. I can't even 100% remember what the prompt was for, but the story I wrote for it was Fury, and it was about um, four people in a quarantine. I was the quarantine one where someone's infected.
Yes. Yes, I recall.
Yeah,
Yes. Okay. Right.
yeah. So the Fury was just four people in a contained room, in a quarantine room, and the PA let them know that one of them was infected, and they had to get rid of the infected person
Hmm.
before the symptoms manifested, and the others would be let go. But I suppose I can give away the ending.
Sure.
Yeah, it was all in one guy's head. He was in there on his own. He killed the other three, and it was the symptoms manifesting over the course of the story.
Oh,
And then it
that is.
finished with the doctors watching from the two-way mirror, going, well, it's confirmed. He's definitely infected.
Oh my God, that is awesome. Yeah, I obviously I read Frying Bacon because I want to say that one was for one of the narrative feast prompts, which
Yep.
I put shout outs for those every single one of those on the podcast, and then I obviously do the separate more in-depth shout outs for kind of the top five highest performing stories. So yeah, there have been, I'm sure you've seen me saying there have been like hundreds of stories submitted since the month started. Um,
Yeah. Yep.
so
Yeah.
I've been scrambling trying to read all of them, or as many as I can. Obviously, I don't think it's physically possible to read all of them that fast, but um,
No, I was going to say you've got your work cut out for you because you say hundreds, and I think that's probably lowballing it. There's been people that have submitted every day.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, you get a couple of those, and you're already over 100 from two or three people. Or
Yeah,
yeah,
it's crazy. It's crazy. I'm really
yeah,
happy about it, obviously, and you know it's really exciting to see the challenge doing so well. But yeah, so unfortunately, I have not read Fury, but as you're describing it, I mean, even if I know the ending, I got to go back and read this because that concept with the twist that it's all in his head and that's the symptoms manifesting. I mean, that is brilliant. I'm telling you right now, like first impression, that's an awesome twist.
Yeah.
Um, so this week of the challenge we're doing cosmic horror. So I was curious, do you have any thoughts on cosmic horror specifically? Is it something that you've ever written before? And if so, do you plan on trying to squeeze in a story or two this week for one of those prompts?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there will be a story for that one. Yeah, I suppose cosmic horror. Instantly, I don't know why you asked that question, and I go, I can't even remember the title of it, but in Stephen King's Night Shift with the short stories,
Hmm.
um, there's that one of the guy who's been to outer space and he has something, he brings something back with him, and it grows eyes and stuff on his body, and
Mm.
he gets rid of them, and then the story ends on the twist that he didn't get rid of it. They're growing on his torso now.
Mm. Right,
But
right, right.
yeah, I
That's a great.
can't. It's horrible that I can't remember the title of that because it's the story that popped into my head instantly.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I suppose in terms of me, I suppose it's sort of been put on the back burner for October with all the prompts. But I'm about 7 chapters in on a story called Shepherd's Plot, which actually started from one of Mina Howell's prompts that from a photo prompt that Mary Ellen Brady created.
Mm.
And I submitted a piece for that, and then thought this story is a bigger story. So yeah, all 7 chapters I've done of that so far are on Substack, and I'll keep going with that once October ends. But that's very cosmic horror themed.
Interesting. Okay, I remember when that prompt came out, and I feel like I saw that post of yours kind of come along in the feed. So what's kind of the pitch for that one? What's the premise you got going on there?
So it pretty much starts off from a light falling from the sky, and then two girls are walking home from sports practice from school, and they cut through the woods, and there's a homeless guy that lives in there, and whatever fell out of the sky sort of took him over and changed him into half human, half creature, and he chased them through the woods, and they made it back to the road, and a car knocked him over, but whatever was in him sort of slunk back to the woods. And then I guess it's kind of from there, I sort of thought, well, that's a longer story. So that's pretty much the premise of the story I wrote for that prompt. And now it's sort of turned into a Salem's Lot
Hmm.
type narrative where almost the town's the main character, and it's sort of whatever this alien is, it's sort of taking over the town a person at a time.
That is amazing. It sounds like a blend of obviously a few different things, but the first like cosmic horror story that came to mind for me was Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space. Um,
Yeah.
but I like how you've blended it into sort of a Salem's Lot type thing where it's kind of spreading through the town. Yeah, I'm definitely hooked. I got to check this one out.
Yeah. I'm I often redo titles all the time, and that one seems lazy to me because I've sort of had Salem's Lot in mind for how I wanted to portray the characters and build the world, and then
Hmm.
called it basically Shepherd's Plot. It's basically rhyming. So I'll probably the title may not remain. I'll keep it as it is while I finish it on Substack. But then if I ever publish it or whatever, I might rethink it.
That's totally fair. I respect the wordplay with the rhyme there, but I totally understand maybe wanting to change that before you publish.
Yeah.
That's great though. So speaking of publishing, what other have you published either self-published or traditionally published and any novels that are currently available?
Right. So I've got one. So I've written 6 and sort of sat on them, and they've collected dust. I've tried to go down the traditional publishing path
Mm.
without any success.
Hmm.
That's a meat grinder. Every time I sort of I'll write another one and try again. But I sort of thought, well, I'll give self publishing a crack. So I think as the 21st of September, Eden War of the Wolf, yeah, is published on Amazon as an ebook only. Sort of me
Okay.
dipping my toe into the water, never doing it before, sort of fumbling my way as I go. So that one's there now, and as of this moment, basically for the next 5 days, for anyone listening, it's a free ebook download on Amazon.
Oh, fantastic. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. So what's that one about then? What's the pitch on that one?
Pitch on that one. It's essentially dystopian future, so it's kind of like a fantasy horror blend.
Okay.
Um, it's basically the world imploded, basically through nuclear war, but one place against the odds survived untouched, and Eden was sort of the paradise where the survivors lived, and then werewolves appeared basically. So it's almost like it's not linked to lunar cycle or anything. It's just people have changed into werewolves, and the last sort of survivors in Eden have to fight for survival. And I guess there's a little bit of a manga or anime blend in there. One of the reviews on Amazon mentioned that it reminded them of Attack on Titan, and I'd say that's fair.
Wow.
In that, there's sort of some branches of military and sort of technology's been lost to time, so it's more medieval in terms of arms.
Hmm.
But yeah, there's like the normal population of werewolves, but there's also alpha werewolves that all sort of have the ability to return to human and shift on command, and all sort of have special abilities. So there's a werewolf called the Call, and he has the ability to control the others.
Hmm.
There's the Quake, who can sort of burrow underground and shake the earth. There's the Gemini Wolf, who has super speed. So there's a little bit there. I would say if I was going to sort of pitch it, it'd be like Attack on Titan meets Silver Bullet meets World War Z.
Hmm. That's a good pitch.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, I just recently finished all of Attack on Titan. I had seen like the first three seasons and then kind of waited for it to get finished and then just didn't get back around to it. But I loved Attack on Titan overall. It was fantastic. So yeah, hearing that along with some of the other elements, you've got me hooked again on this one.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Is
I
this
really enjoyed writing it.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. Is it part of a series? Or are some of the other books you have currently drafted in the same world, or are they all just kind of different stories?
No, so it is the start of a series.
Mm,
So the book sort of finishes, but with more to go.
mm,
So I'm a few chapters into book two on that one as well in the background.
mm.
But yeah, the other five I've written, yeah, all completely different stories.
Awesome. Okay. Well, obviously you don't have to go through every single one of them, but are the other ones what's kind of I guess kind of like some of the unique elements you have in there? Are they different like subgenres of horror? Like are you experimenting in any of them, or what's kind of the thought process behind these other books that you have written?
Yeah, okay. So there's one that I'm not even settled on a title,
Hmm.
but it's fully written and edited. But I would say that one is Resident Evil meets John Carpenter's The Thing. I sort
Oh
of
man.
thought it's kind of set in a small town that I used to live in Australia, um, without keeping the name, and that's the sort of town I had in mind.
Okay.
And I guess I kind of asked myself the question, what would happen if something like The Thing actually sort of happened in a small town?
Mm.
Um, and it's kind of like that one's, yeah, it's kind of like Resident Evil, in terms of there's like it all started because of a science experiment gone wrong with a hidden lab under the town,
Oh, yeah.
and a team that goes in to sort of retrieve data to try and work out what went on. Um,
That's amazing.
yeah, and so like even the wildlife and stuff, like everything's been affected. And if it's kind of like The Thing, if it gets injured or whatever, it'll latch onto something else and join to combine some sort of awful hybrid.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and then I've got one's pretty much just my crack at an eighties teen slasher.
Mm.
Um, I have another fantasy book that's more sort of targeted at young adult. I also have another one that's more supernatural, I guess, called The Dice, where a couple of kids, sort of driving home, stop at a yard sale and pick up a pair of fluffy dice, and they've got a spirit of someone attached to them.
Amazing, amazing. I love how just kind of how much variety there is in all these premises, but they all sound super unique. Which I think that's something I've noticed with your work in general. Like you're really good at kind of jumping from one, type of horror to another, but you always land on your feet. Like I still think about that slasher story you did. That was amazing. And then and then we look at some of your submissions like for the challenge this month. Like the quarantine one is it sounds amazing. I need to read that one. But then I think about the frying bacon one, paranormal horror, and it's just really amazing how you can kind of jump between all those different horror genres and always like come up with some new angle. I love that. So you mentioned fantasy, and I didn't include this in my list of questions that I sent you, but I'd love to ask you about it because it's become such a big part of what I'm working on with Devine. But you participated in one of Mina Howell's photo prompts where it was a story set in my fantasy sci-fi universe of Devine. And obviously, these days, there's way more Devine fans than I ever thought there ever would be. Um,
Yep.
and you created a character called Blackheart, who anybody listening to this, that's following along with the Order of the Pawn series, knows that Blackheart has become a very integral villain in this first, story arc of the series. So I'd love to hear more about kind of how you approached that and came up with that character.
Uh, yeah. So I saw the challenge. I saw Mina's prompt for that week for Devine, and ashamed to say that I hadn't read any Devine before that prompt. So that involved me binge reading your stories or the prequel stories that you'd released for
Hmm.
Devine
Hmm.
to try and grasp. Okay, this is fantasy, so I need to understand the lore and the world,
Right.
and then I kind of thought, well, I've always found villains interesting. So I thought I would try and create some little side villain that could be a standalone or come back or, his story could end there. But I just thought I'll just do this little side story and sort of thought, right, what sort of guy do I need for it? And I just come up with someone who's just a bastard, basically.
Right. Right.
Yeah, but with layers, like someone that it's kind of weird. I always try and write my villains likable,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah. No, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So coming up with the idea for him, I just sort of thought, right, well, it just popped into my head. Basically, I thought it'd just a loner, a rogue, and tried to think about people like that. I guess a guy that came to mind, but I didn't really want to stick to it was a character like Bronn out of A Song of Ice and Fire.
Hmm.
That was sort of I thought about that at the time and thought, I guess almost for the look more than anything, and then just came up with the idea of the meeting the knights on the road, and
Hmm.
then thought, well, I kind of tied it into the Devine world with location, and then um, bringing the rot into it.
Yeah, which that was like such a huge kind of aha moment for me. As I was reading that story of yours, I loved the character of Blackheart, but the moment when I was like, holy crap, I need this character in the series was when you had kind of taken a spin on the rot where I mean, obviously you mentioned Resident Evil, so that concept of something that's kind of ubiquitous and kind of infects people, but it has a mind of its own. Typically up until that point, I had always, treated the rot as something that, like, once it infects people, they're just zombies, basically, right? Like, just like a kind of a
Yeah,
fantasy version of a zombie. But what you had done with it is that Blackheart's character was sort of still in control, like almost like working in tandem with the rot and kind of, helping like it sort of reach its goals. And if I recall correctly, too, it was almost like Blackheart was, to an extent, being held hostage by the rot. So it's not like he was, yeah, I could be wrong. It's been a while since I've read it, but I felt like it was sort of like a sympathetic villain, where it's like, yeah, he's a bad guy, he's doing bad things, but he's sort of, kind of, to an extent, being forced into it, even if some of it's part of his nature.
yeah, yeah. It came across as a choice, but it wasn't one.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, and you've just reminded me, like I sort of waffled on and talked my way back to remembering. I just remember reading your prequel stories and loving the contract angle.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, that'd be interesting if if the rot fought fire with fire.
Mm, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had not thought of that angle. And let me tell you, when I was so excited when I saw what you did with your story, where I was like, obviously, if you said no, I wouldn't have taken the character. But I remember I messaged you right away. I was like, can I please use this
Yeah,
character in the
definitely.
series?
Yeah, like yeah, you give me too much credit. I mean, you already had contracts, and the setup. I just sort of used what you'd done. So
Right.
yeah, I had absolutely no issue with it.
Yeah, it was just such a it was a connection that I hadn't made. And I'm only, let's see, three chapters into the series, so still really early on, but just I cannot imagine the work that I've done with the series so far without Blackheart. Like he just feels like such an integral part of the story that I'm telling there. It would not be as good without him. And so I had to get kind of your perspective on how you created him because, like I said, I love him as a character, and I love the concept of the rot, like you said, playing, fighting fire with fire.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited to explore that further in the series, but it just feels like what I initially had in mind felt like very surface level, like, hey, it's fantasy zombies, right? And Blackheart just adds this whole nother layer to it that I'm just so excited to explore. So it's fantastic.
Oh, yeah, you're more than welcome. Yeah, I waffled on with my answer before, but I've I've come around. I basically, yeah, it was that idea came first because when I read your prequel stories,
Hmm.
yeah, the contract idea stuck, and then I worked backwards. Once I worked backwards from there, I was thinking about who would the Rot want. That's how he was sort of created.
Right, 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 right. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. I love hearing the background behind it too, because like I said, it just feels like Blackheart's been in Devine since day one. Honestly, he just feels like a character that has to be there now. It's just fantastic. So yeah, you had mentioned too that you've done some stories. Obviously, we talked a little bit about it, where it's like you're mixing sort of fantasy and horror. Um, do you have any? I guess there's the werewolf story there, but are there any other examples, kind of in your either on Substack or just that you have in production, where you're kind of mixing horror with other genres like that, fantasy or otherwise? Is that something you do very often?
Um, Off the top of my head, I can't really think of any other examples.
Okay.
The sort of fantasy, yes, sort of the young adult novel I wrote is kind of I would sort of class it as a horror fantasy,
Mm.
and then obviously Eden War of the Wolf. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, off the top of my head, I kind of I enjoy doing it, but
Hmm.
yeah, they I tend to sort of gravitate towards horror mainly.
Okay.
I do enjoy trying other things. Like you did have uh, a power up prompt for steampunk, and I really enjoyed having a crack at that.
Yes, I remember. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I do certainly not against genre blending or other genres. I'll always have a crack. But yeah, just off the top of my head, I can't really think of any other blends at the moment. There probably are some, and I just can't remember.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I was just curious. Yeah, that makes sense though. Yeah, it's good to experiment, but it's always nice to kind of come back to the genre that you're most familiar with. It's so funny because I've always kind of pursued horror writing first and foremost, but just over the course of being on Substack and the sort of kind of, just really just it's like sudden after years of like, nobody really reading Devine stories, all of a sudden now there's people who I would consider pretty diehard fans, where they're always asking about the new stuff and kind of messaging me about it and whatnot. And so now it's like, wait a second, am I a fantasy writer? Like
Yeah, I think you are.
yeah,
I think you
it's
are, but I think you're also a horror writer. I don't think you're pigeonholed into one.
For sure. Well, I
Mhm.
appreciate you saying that. It's just crazy like how the creative journey can kind of just take you in wild directions like that, which is why it's important to experiment, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I honestly think the stories tell us where they're going as well.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
On that subject actually, I'm curious. Um do you consider yourself, when it comes to like the types of writers, do you consider yourself more of like a pantser where you kind of just dive into the story and see where it's going? Or are you more of like the plotter where you have like an outline all ready to go beforehand? Or is it somewhere in the middle with you?
No, definitely a pantser.
Right.
I'm hopeless. I actually tend to get bogged down if I try and map it out.
Hmm.
I tend to start with a thread and then just follow it.
Okay.
Um, I mean, to use the Devine example again, I finally got there with my memory. But yeah, just started off with you know, if I'm going to do the Rot doing a contract, who would he want? And then sort of the story formed from back to front. I had the ending and then just followed the thread to see where it started.
That's amazing. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I personally also love pantsing. I've always been like kind of a pantser when it comes to writing. But with certain bigger projects, I find myself having to at least have some sort of, structure or in place. But at the end of the day, and I'm sure you would agree, it's like when you're taking sort of the pantsing approach, you're really just kind of opening yourself up to inspiration in the moment, and that allows you to kind of have a bunch of those moments where you're like, oh, this sounds cool, and let's go this direction, and just kind of let the story guide you, like you said.
Yeah, definitely. But I will say that there is absolute benefits to not being a pantser. The amount of times I've had to go back to try and remember if you can be 60,000 words in and you have to try and find where you mentioned something before to make sure it hasn't contradicted or
Right.
yeah, at least if you're mapping it out, you're not going to fall into that.
Right, right. No, that's a very fair point because I'm laughing because I can think of times when I've had like a big doc open and I just hit kind of Control F and start searching for like the spot that I'm looking for where I said something forever back.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. So my next question for you here is looking ahead to kind of, we're coming up on the end of 2025, going into next year. What are some of your goals as far as writing goes? Like, are you looking to publish some of those manuscripts, or is there anything you got planned for Substack? Like, what's the next year look like for you?
Yeah. Okay. So short term, definitely continue with the October horror prompts.
Yeah.
But then after that's sort of all done, I keep going with the story I mentioned earlier, Shepherd's Plot.
Mm-hmm.
I'll keep attacking prompts and stuff that come through, your power up prompts each week, and definitely Mina's as well. When Mina does the prompts or the joint narrative challenges and stuff like that, I like participating in those.
Yeah.
Um, I'm 95% fiction, but I've got a little series going that there's a couple of parts I've called The Doubt of Self-Publishing, where I'm just sort of blogging stuff that works and stuff that doesn't with
Mm.
what I've been doing with Eden War of the Wolf. So I'll keep going with that as well. I haven't updated that for a little while, but I'm just waiting. I'm testing out a few things at the moment with Fussy Librarian and Free Booksy ads and Amazon ads and learning all of that. So I reckon part 3 will be my take on all of that and how it worked and what worked and what didn't. And then I actually I wanted to write the other night and I couldn't think of anything to write. So I actually just wrote sort of a jumbled film piece on the original Nightmare on Elm Street. And it was, yeah, it was just my thoughts, my childhood memories of it, fun facts about the film that I thought people might not know. And it did okay. I didn't expect it to. I just sort of wrote it because I wanted to write something that day. But in the sort of next 12 months, I might revisit that as well. So I guess, yeah, it was fun to do something a bit different.
Yeah, no, I love that you're kind of expanding your horizons there into some, kind of nonfiction article type stuff. Um, I was gonna say I haven't read it yet. I've got it pulled up right now. The Nightmare on Elm Street article sounds amazing. I saw it come across the feed there, and I think it's a great idea, to kind of dive into some of your favorite horror, and kind of break it down. Obviously, Nightmare on Elm Street's a classic, so that's a good one to start with. Yeah, and then, speaking of the other series you mentioned, the articles about self-publishing, that brings me actually perfectly to my last question, which is, given the experience that you've had so far, not only self-publishing, but just, writing in general and publishing online, I would be curious to know, off the top of your head, what are some lessons you've learned, and what's some advice that you would give to, writers who are just kind of starting out?
Yeah, okay. So in terms of self-publishing, I would say if you're considering it, do, do it. Basically,
Mm,
it's kind of one of those things now where I feel like I put it off for too long because it's a marathon self-publishing as opposed to a sprint,
mm,
and I just feel like I could have been doing more sooner. I'm starting now, and that's great, and I'm learning a lot. But I kind of have those shaking head moments where I think, I should have been doing this years ago.
right.
Um, and it's one of those things where I'd say like, I'm sort of starting with no budget and minimal platform, but going into it knowing that it's going to be a slow burn, and I'm building from the ground up.
Mm,
But certainly for anyone looking at self-publishing, consider those things. It's good to try and build a platform first, and even let people know about it before it's coming out. Um, and then everyone's goals are different. If you're self-publishing, don't sort of worry too much. Don't compare yourself to others. Comparison is the thief of joy. You'll tear your own hair out
right.
worrying why you're not doing as well as someone else, or putting expectations on yourself to hit when it's a complete unknown.
Mm,
And then just in terms of writing in general, for anyone looking to start out writing, just read and write. Just type, just write. Take a pen out, get a notebook, just write anything. Practice is practice, and the rule of 100 is something that I love, which is basically that if you do something for 18 minutes a day for a year, you're better than 95% of the population at it. So even
mm.
if you just write for 18 minutes a day for a year, you will improve so much.
That is fantastic. I haven't heard of that specific kind of, rule or concept before, but it makes total sense. And it's
Yeah.
it's so easy to commit to too. You said it was 18 minutes a day, right?
Yeah. Yep. And yeah, like, yeah, and just don't be too hard on yourself. Like I see some comments on Substack sometimes where people are getting down on themselves because they read instead of wrote,
Right.
where I consider that part of the work.
Mm.
Um, as I said before, I read to enjoy the story, but I read to try and learn what other authors are doing, learn my likes and dislikes. I don't think there's any wasted time as an author in reading.
Mm. I think that's an absolutely true statement. Yes, absolutely. I think Stephen King was the one who said that great writers are also great readers.
Yeah, he did, and that's probably a good point as well. You could do if you want to learn something. It's not an exhaustive or extensive look at it, but people could do worse than read On Writing by Stephen King just to get an overview.
Yes, yes, I wholeheartedly agree. I read that book years ago, and I recommend it every chance I get. So yes, totally agree with that as well.
Yeah, I reread it every now and then. It's weird. It's not the sort of book you think you'd pick up again, but it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, no, it's definitely good. I'm actually overdue for another read of it as well. Now that you mention it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, that brings me to the end of my questions today, but this has been just a fantastic interview. It is so cool learning about kind of what led you to be a writer. And then obviously, kind of the mind behind all the stories, not to mention some of these amazing concepts you have for upcoming books. So I'm really excited to see, how far you go here on Substack and otherwise. And you can definitely count me in for a copy of that book you have out now and any future ones as well.
Awesome. Thanks very much for having me as well. It's been awesome.
All right, and thank you again to CJ Knight, aka Terrifying Tales, for joining me on this week's episode. It was a fantastic interview. I learned a lot, I enjoyed speaking with him, and I cannot wait to read more of his work because I love what I've seen so far. All right, next week on Substack. So, next week we're heading into the final week of the first Indulgence. It's going to be horror roulette, and every day will bring something unique and different. I myself will be out of town on a last-minute business trip, but you can still expect daily prompts and a podcast on Friday for Halloween as well. But that's all I've got for you this week. So thank you for listening, my friends. It's been a very long year for me, but every moment that I've spent here with all of you has been the highlight of my day every single day. So thank you for all that you do. for the art that you create, and for listening to me ramble on this show every week. This is Bradley Ramsey, signing off.
Oh my, a literary magazine. Well, I suppose one more couldn't hurt.
Hey, Lord Devereux, you've already had 10 literary magazines today. Save that one for later.
Ah, never. I must devour them all.